Picture this, you've saved every dollar for months. Worked double shifts. All to be able to afford bringing your woman abroad to be with you. You buy a plane ticket home to see the woman you love. You can already imagine her face when she opens the door. But when that door finally swings open, what you see isn't joy or excitement. It's something that will shatter everything you thought you knew about your life. This is the story of Chukwuemeka Okonkwo, a young Nigerian man whose surprise trip home became the most devastating moment of his existence. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Chukwuemeka Okonkwo, or Emeka as everyone called him, had been living in Houston, Texas for exactly 2 years and 4 months when he decided to surprise his girlfriend back in Lagos, Nigeria. He was 28 years old, working as a warehouse supervisor during the day and driving for a ride-share company 3 nights a week. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and every paycheck brought him closer to his dreams. Those dreams included bringing Precious, his girlfriend of 5 years, to America so they could finally start the life they'd been planning since university. He would video call her every single day without fail. Sometimes twice a day when his schedule allowed it. They would talk about everything from what they ate for breakfast to their future children's names. Precious would show him around her small apartment in Surulere, the same apartment they had shared before he left for the States, and he would feel that familiar ache in his chest, that longing to hold her again, to smell her perfume, to hear her laugh without the delay of internet connection. The idea to surprise her came on a Tuesday evening in October. Emeka had just finished his shift at the warehouse and was sitting in his small studio apartment, eating leftover jollof rice and watching a Nollywood movie on his laptop. His phone buzzed with a message from Precious. It was a selfie of her pouting, with the caption, "I miss you so much baby, when are you coming home?" He stared at that photo for a long time. Her smooth dark skin, those eyes that always seemed to smile even when her lips didn't, the small gap between her front teeth that she used to be self-conscious about but he found adorable. Right then, scrolling through his banking app, he saw his savings account balance. $6,300. He'd been saving for her visa process, for the immigration lawyer fees, for all the bureaucratic hurdles they'd have to jump through. But what if he used some of that money for something else? What if he just showed up at her door? The thought alone made his heart race. He could picture it so clearly, her shock, her screams of joy, the way she'd jump into his arms like she always did. That night, he barely slept. By morning, he'd made up his mind. He would fly to Lagos in 3 weeks, spend 5 days there, and return before anyone at work got suspicious. He told his supervisor at the warehouse that he had a family emergency and needed time off. He traded his ride-share shifts with another driver. He bought the ticket for $972, a round trip on Turkish Airlines with a layover in Istanbul. Every time he thought about backing out, about being sensible and sticking to the original plan, he'd look at Precious's photos on his phone and his resolve would strengthen. This was love, wasn't it? Grand gestures, surprises, showing up when you're least expected. He'd seen it in movies 1,000 times. He wanted to be that guy, the one who crosses oceans for love. The 3 weeks crawled by with agonizing slowness. The hardest part was maintaining normalcy during their daily video calls. Precious would ask him about his day and he'd have to lie about his plans, pretend that everything was routine, that he wasn't counting down the hours until he could see her face in person. On one of those calls, about a week before his flight, something felt different. Precious seemed distracted, kept looking at something off camera, and her responses were shorter than usual. When he asked if everything was okay, she smiled that smile he knew so well and said she was just tired from work. She was a receptionist at a private hospital in Victoria Island, a job she'd gotten about 8 months after he left Nigeria. He remembered how excited she'd been when she got that position, how she'd called him at 3 in the morning his time because she forgot about the time difference. He'd answered anyway, groggy and confused, but her joy had been infectious. "Are you sure everything's fine?" he pressed during that call, noting the way her eyes wouldn't quite meet his through the screen. She laughed, a sound that usually melted his worries away, and told him he was being paranoid. "You're working too hard over there, baby. You're seeing problems where there are none. I'm just exhausted, that's all. Dr. Akinlaid has been piling work on all of us." He wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her. So he did. He pushed away that tiny voice in the back of his mind that whispered something was off. Instead, he focused on the surprise, on the reunion, on holding her again after 28 months apart. The day of his flight finally arrived. It was a Thursday morning, early November. Houston was experiencing one of those unseasonably warm days, but Emeka barely noticed the weather. He took an Uber to George Bush Intercontinental Airport, his stomach a knot of excitement and nerves. The flight to Istanbul was long, 14 hours of movies he didn't really watch and meals he barely tasted. During the layover, he bought Precious a bottle of her favorite perfume from the duty-free shop, Chanel Chance, the same one she'd been wearing the day they first kissed under the mango tree on their university campus. The second flight, from Istanbul to Lagos, was another 6 hours. He tried to sleep but couldn't. His mind kept playing and replaying the moment he would knock on her door, the way her face would transform from confusion to recognition to pure elation. He landed at Murtala Muhammad International Airport on a Friday evening. The familiar chaos of Lagos hit him immediately, the humidity, the noise, the smell of a city that never quite sleeps. He cleared customs, collected his single carry-on bag, and stepped out into the arrivals hall where taxi drivers and airport hustlers competed for passengers with aggressive enthusiasm. He negotiated with a taxi driver, a middle-aged man with tribal marks on his face who asked too many questions about America, and they set off towards Surulere as the sun began to set, painting the Lagos sky in shades of orange and purple. Traffic was the special kind of terrible that only Lagos on a Friday evening could offer. The drive that should have taken 40 minutes stretched into nearly 2 hours. Emeka didn't mind. He watched the familiar streets roll by, the street food vendors, the Okada riders weaving dangerously through traffic, the churches and mosques standing side by side, the organized chaos that was home. It was almost 8:30 when the taxi finally pulled up in front of Precious's building, a modest 3-story structure painted yellow and white, with rusty balcony railings and water stains on the exterior walls. Emeka paid the driver, adding a generous tip because he was too happy to haggle, and stood on the street for a moment, just looking up at the building. He'd lived here once, in apartment 2B, right next to Precious's 2A. The landlord had eventually allowed them to unofficially merge the two apartments after they'd been together for 2 years. That was before America, before visas and immigration dreams, when life was simpler and love felt like enough. He climbed the stairs, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. The building was quiet except for the sound of a generator humming somewhere and a television playing a news program in one of the ground-floor apartments. When he reached the second floor, he walked down the familiar corridor, past Mrs. Okafor's apartment where the smell of egusi soup wafted out, past the shared bathroom that thankfully had been renovated since he left, until he stood in front of apartment 2A. The door was closed but he could see light filtering through the gap at the bottom. She was home. Perfect. He raised his hand to knock, then paused, suddenly aware of how he must look after 20+ hours of travel. He was wearing the cologne she'd once told him made her weak in the knees, had on the watch she'd saved up to buy him for his 26th birthday. His hand trembled slightly as he finally knocked, 3 firm raps. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he heard movement inside, footsteps approaching the door. His smile was so wide his cheeks hurt. The door opened. But it wasn't Precious standing there. It was a man. A tall, dark-skinned man in shorts and a singlet, barefoot, with a gold chain around his neck and a confused expression on his face. For a few seconds, Emeka's brain simply couldn't process what he was seeing. The man spoke first. "Yes. Can I help you?" Emeka found his voice, though it came out strangled. "I'm looking for Precious. Precious Nwosu. She lives here." The man's expression shifted from confusion to something else, something that looked almost like pity. "Oh. You're Emeka." It wasn't a question. The man said his name like he knew exactly who he was. Before Emeka could respond, before he could ask how this stranger knew his name, Precious appeared behind the man. She was wearing a silk nightgown, her hair wrapped in a bonnet, and the color drained from her face when she saw who was at the door. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Emeka felt like he was watching the scene from outside his body, like this was happening to someone else. The three of them stood frozen in this terrible tableau, nobody speaking, the weight of the moment pressing down like physical force. Finally, Precious whispered, "Emeka. What are you doing here?" Her voice was shaky, afraid. Not the voice of someone happy to see the man she loved. Not the voice of someone who'd been counting down the days until they could be reunited. It was the voice of someone who'd been caught. "I came to surprise you," Emeka heard himself say, and the words sounded absurd even to his own ears. He looked at the man, then back at Precious. "Who is this?" The man stepped back, giving Precious space to move forward. She didn't invite Emeka in. Instead, she stepped out into the corridor, pulling the door partially closed behind her. "Emeka, you should have told me you were coming. You can't just show up like this." The audacity of that statement, the sheer nerve of it, hit him like a physical blow. "Who is that man in your apartment, Precious?" His voice was rising now, control slipping. "In our apartment. The apartment we shared. Who is he?" She looked down at her feet, unable to meet his eyes. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "His name is Tund. We've been seeing each other." The corridor started spinning. Emeka reached out to steady himself against the wall. "How long?" She didn't answer. "How long, Precious?" Still nothing. The man, Tund, appeared in the doorway again, now wearing a shirt. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Look, guy, I think it's better if you come back another time when everyone is calm. This is not the right moment for this conversation." Something inside Emeka snapped. 2 years. 2 years of working himself to exhaustion, of living in a cramped studio apartment when he could have afforded better if he wasn't saving every penny for their future. 2 years of video calls and I love yous and making plans. 2 years of turning down women who showed interest because he had a girlfriend back home, because he was taken, because he was loyal. And this was what he came home to. A stranger in his girlfriend's nightclothes telling him to leave. "Don't tell me when I can talk to her," Emeka said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Precious, I'm asking you one more time. How long has this been going on?" She finally looked up at him, and there were tears in her eyes. 6 months, she said. "It's been 6 months. 6 months. He thought back, counting. That would mean it started around May. He remembered May. That was when she'd gotten promoted at the hospital, when she'd seemed happier on their calls, more energetic. He'd thought it was the new job, the better pay. It had never occurred to him that her happiness had a different source. "I'm sorry," she continued, the words tumbling out now. "I never meant for it to happen. You were so far away, and the calls weren't enough, and I was lonely, and Tund, he works at the hospital too, he's one of the doctors, and he was just there, and I was weak, and I'm so sorry." "Were you ever going to tell me?" Emeka asked. "Or were you just going to keep collecting the money I send, keep making plans about America, keep saying you love me while you had another man warming your bed? Precious flinched at the harshness in his tone. I do love you, Emeka. I never stopped loving you. But love isn't always enough. You left. You chose America over staying here with me. I chose our future. His voice echoed in the corridor now, and he saw Mrs. Okafor's door crack open slightly, her nosy neighbor unable to resist the drama. Everything I did was for us, for you, so I could bring you over and we could build something better than what we had here. Tun stepped forward again, placing a protective hand on Precious's shoulder. I think you should leave, man. You're obviously upset, and I get it, but you can't be shouting at her like this. Emeka looked at that hand on her shoulder, at how natural it looked there, at how Precious didn't shrug it off. Something broke inside him then, something fundamental. He took a step back, then another. You know what the worst part is? He said, looking directly at Precious. The worst part is that I bought your favorite perfume at the airport. It's in my bag right now. Chanel Chance. I remembered the exact one because that's what you were wearing when we first kissed. I've carried that memory with me for 2 years like some kind of treasure. And you couldn't even remember enough about us to be faithful. He turned and walked away before she could respond, before the tears burning in his eyes could actually fall, before he completely lost what little dignity he had left. Behind him, he heard Precious calling his name, but he didn't stop, didn't turn around. He took the stairs 2 at a time, burst out onto the street, and started walking with no destination in mind. Lagos at night swallowed him up, the noise and lights and endless movement providing a kind of anonymity he desperately needed. He walked for blocks, past bars where happy people drank and laughed, past churches holding late-night services, past street corners where young men gathered to talk and smoke. His phone buzzed constantly in his pocket, calls and texts from Precious that he ignored. Eventually, around midnight, he found himself at a small bar in Yaba, a place he and his friends used to frequent during university. It looked exactly the same, down to the peeling paint and the plastic chairs arranged around wobbly tables. He ordered a bottle of Star beer, then another, then lost count. The bartender, a stocky man with a scar above his left eyebrow, made conversation that Emeka barely participated in. Other patrons came and went. At some point, a woman in a tight dress tried to chat him up, but he politely declined. When the bar finally closed at 3 in the morning, Emeka found a cheap hotel nearby, the kind that rented rooms by the hour but didn't ask questions. He lay on the thin mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling, his mind replaying every moment of the last few hours. Every interaction with Precious over the past 6 months suddenly made sense in this new, terrible context. The times she'd seemed distant, the calls she'd cut short claiming she was tired, the way she'd stopped asking when he was coming home. The signs had been there. He'd just been too in love, too trusting, too stupid to see them. Saturday morning came with a vicious hangover and the harsh reality that he still had 4 more days in Lagos. For days he'd planned to spend with Precious, reconnecting, making love, eating at their favorite restaurants, visiting friends, being that couple everyone envied. Instead, he was alone in a dingy hotel room with a broken heart and no plan. His phone was dead, which was a blessing because it meant he didn't have to see whatever messages Precious had sent. He checked out of the hotel and found a phone charging station at a nearby shop. While his phone charged, he sat on a bench and watched Lagos go about its Saturday business. Families heading to market, children playing football in the street, hawkers selling everything from phone accessories to garden eggs. Life continued, indifferent to his pain. When his phone finally powered on, there were 47 missed calls and 32 text messages. Most were from Precious, ranging from apologies to explanations to anger that he wouldn't answer her. There were also messages from numbers he didn't recognize, probably friends of hers who'd heard what happened. He deleted them all without reading most of them. Then he called the one person in Lagos he knew he could trust, his older brother, Obinna. Obinna lived in Lekki with his wife and 2 children. He worked as an engineer for an oil company and had been the one who'd initially encouraged Emeka to pursue opportunities abroad. The phone rang 3 times before Obinna answered, his voice groggy with sleep. "Emeka? Is that you? Is everything okay? It's like 7 in the morning." "I'm in Lagos," Emeka said simply. There was a pause. "You're what? Since when? Why didn't you tell anyone?" "I wanted to surprise Precious." Another pause, longer this time. Then, carefully, "How did that go?" Emeka laughed, a bitter sound. "How do you think it went, brother?" "Ah. I see. Where are you now?" Emeka gave him the general area. "Stay there. I'm coming to get you. Don't move." 40 minutes later, Obinna pulled up in his Toyota Camry, concern etched across his face. Emeka climbed into the passenger seat, and they sat in silence for a moment before Obinna spoke. "You want to talk about it?" So Emeka told him everything. The surprise plan, the ticket, the anticipation, and the devastating reality that had awaited him. Obinna listened without interrupting, his jaw getting tighter as the story progressed. When Emeka finished, Obinna was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "I'm sorry, brother. I'm so sorry. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but..." He trailed off. Emeka turned to look at him sharply. "What do you mean you're not surprised?" Obinna sighed, gripping the steering wheel though the car was parked. "I saw her. About 2 months ago. I was at the Palms in Lekki, and I saw her with some guy. They were very comfortable together, holding hands, laughing. I thought maybe it was just a friend, or maybe I was mistaken and it wasn't her. I convinced myself I was wrong because I didn't want to believe she would do that to you. I should have said something. I should have called you immediately." Emeka felt like he'd been punched again. 2 months ago. You saw them 2 months ago. I'm sorry. I thought I might be causing trouble over nothing. I thought maybe you two had broken up and you just hadn't told the family yet. I should have asked. I should have checked. Emeka put his face in his hands. 2 months. His own brother had seen evidence of the betrayal 2 months ago. How many other people knew? How many of their mutual friends had seen Precious with Tund and said nothing? Had he been the only fool in Lagos who didn't know? "Take me to your house," Emeka said finally. "I need to sleep. I need to think. I don't know what I need, but I can't be out here right now." Obinna drove him to Lekki, to his spacious 3-bedroom apartment in a gated estate. His wife, Ngozi, took one look at Emeka's face and seemed to understand that something terrible had happened. She made him breakfast, which he picked at, and set him up in their guest room with fresh sheets and towels. "Sleep," she said gently. "Everything is always clearer after rest." But sleep brought no clarity, only dreams where Precious was happy to see him, where the man at the door had never existed, where the surprise had gone exactly as planned. He woke in the late afternoon, disoriented and aching. Over the next 2 days, Emeka existed in a strange fog. He stayed at Obinna's house, barely eating, spending hours just staring at nothing. Obinna and Ngozi gave him space but also made sure he wasn't completely alone. On Sunday evening, Obinna sat with him on the balcony, both of them drinking beer and watching the sun set over Lagos. "What are you going to do?" Obinna asked. Emeka shrugged. "Go back to Houston. What else can I do?" "Are you going to talk to her again before you leave?" "What's there to talk about? She made her choice. She chose him. You spent 5 years with her, Emeka. 5 years. Don't you think you at least deserve closure? Real closure, not just running away." Emeka took a long drink of his beer. Maybe I don't want closure. Maybe I just want to forget this ever happened. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. You can't forget 5 years. You can't forget the person you thought you'd marry, the one you'd imagined growing old with. Memories kept surfacing at random moments throughout the day. Precious laughing at his terrible jokes. Precious falling asleep on his shoulder during a long bus ride. Precious defending him to her skeptical parents when he was just a broke university student with big dreams and no clear path. That Precious felt like a different person from the one in the silk nightgown with tears in her eyes and another man's hand on her shoulder. On Monday morning, Emeka's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. Against his better judgment, he answered. It was Precious's mother. Emeka, my son, please. Precious is not eating, not sleeping. She's crying all the time. Please, just talk to her. Just give her a chance to explain properly. The manipulation of it, the attempt to make him feel guilty for her daughter's choices, made him angry. With all due respect, Ma, I don't think I'm the one who needs to do any explaining. Your daughter was the one with another man in her apartment. There was a sharp intake of breath. You don't understand. Long distance is hard. You left her here alone. What did you expect? I expected loyalty, Emeka said, his voice hard. I expected the woman who said she loved me, who said she would wait for me, to actually wait. I expected basic respect and honesty. You young people and your pride, she said. So you will throw away 5 years because of one mistake. 6 months is not one mistake, Ma. 6 months is a choice she made over and over again, every single day. He hung up before she could respond. The call left him shaking with rage. How dare they try to make him the villain in this story? How dare they suggest he was being unreasonable for being hurt by betrayal? On Tuesday, his last full day in Lagos, Emeka finally agreed to meet Precious one more time. Not because he wanted closure, not because he thought it would make him feel better, but because he realized he needed to see her one more time to truly understand that it was over. They met at a small cafe in Ikeja, neutral territory. She arrived first, looking exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She'd lost weight, he noticed, her cheeks more hollow than they'd been on their video calls. When she saw him, her eyes filled with tears immediately. They ordered drinks neither of them touched and sat in uncomfortable silence for a long moment. Finally, Precious spoke. Thank you for agreeing to see me. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, Emeka admitted. Why did you do it, Precious? That's all I really want to know. Why? She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I was lonely, Emeka. So lonely. Do you know what it's like to go to bed alone every night, to wake up alone every morning, to see couples everywhere and feel like half of yourself is missing? The video calls weren't enough. They just made it worse because I could see you but couldn't touch you. And you were always so busy, so focused on working and saving money. Sometimes I felt like I was just another item on your to-do list. So you found someone else, Emeka said flatly. It wasn't like that. I didn't go looking for it. Tund was just a colleague at first. We became friends. He listened to me. He was there. And one day, after a particularly long shift, we grabbed drinks, and one thing led to another. I hated myself afterward. I swore it would never happen again. But it did. But it did, she confirmed, her voice breaking. And each time I told myself it was the last time. I tried to break it off with him multiple times. But then I'd be alone again and you'd be in Houston and I'd feel so empty, and I'd go back to him. I'm weak, Emeka. I'm not as strong as you. I couldn't handle the distance. Did you ever actually love me? The question came out before he could stop it. Her head snapped up. Of course I loved you. I still love you. You were my first real love, my best friend. What I felt for you was real, all of it. But love doesn't exist in a vacuum. Love needs presence, needs physical touch, needs the person to be there. I was working for our future, Emeka said, his voice rising slightly. Everything I did was so we could have a better life together. I know. And part of me is grateful for that. But another part of me resents you for leaving, for choosing potential future happiness over present reality with me. Is that fair? Probably not. But it's how I felt. They sat in silence again, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on them. Finally, Emeka asked the question he wasn't sure he wanted answered. Do you love him? Precious's hesitation was answer enough, but she spoke anyway. I don't know. It's different from what I felt for you. Less intense maybe, but more comfortable. He's here. He's present. He's not a voice on a phone screen promising a future that feels increasingly imaginary. So what now? Emeka asked. Are you asking me to forgive you? To take you back? To somehow make this work despite everything? I don't know what I'm asking for, she admitted. Maybe just for you not to hate me. Maybe just for you to understand that I'm human and I made a terrible mistake. 6 months isn't a mistake, Precious. It's a relationship. You had a whole relationship with him while stringing me along. I wasn't stringing you along. I genuinely didn't know what to do. I was paralyzed between two worlds, two men, two versions of myself. Emeka stood up then, suddenly exhausted by the entire conversation. I can't do this anymore. I can't sit here and listen to excuses and explanations that don't change anything. You made your choice. You chose him, chose comfort over commitment, chose what was easy over what was right. I hope it makes you happy. I really do. He walked out of the cafe, leaving her crying at the table, and this time it felt final. This time, there was no anger, no shock, just a deep, soul-weary sadness. The next morning, Wednesday, Emeka's brother drove him to the airport. They didn't talk much during the drive, both lost in their own thoughts. At the departures terminal, Obinna pulled him into a tight hug. You're going to be okay, brother. I know it doesn't feel like it now, but you will be. You're stronger than you think. I don't feel strong, Emeka admitted. I feel stupid for believing in something that was already dead. Believing in love doesn't make you stupid. It makes you brave. She's the one who should feel stupid for losing someone who loved her that much. Emeka checked in for his flight, went through security, and found his gate. The airport was crowded with travelers, families reuniting, business people rushing to meetings, students heading abroad for education. Everyone with their own stories, their own dramas, their own heartbreaks. His pain wasn't special or unique, he realized. It was just human. The flight back was worse than the flight there because now he had nothing to look forward to, no anticipation to distract him from the discomfort and boredom. He arrived back in Houston on Thursday morning, local time, exhausted in every possible way. His studio apartment looked exactly as he'd left it, but it felt different somehow, smaller and lonelier. Over the following weeks, Emeka threw himself into work with an intensity that worried his colleagues. He took every extra shift available, volunteered for overtime, spent his days off driving for the ride-share app until he was too tired to think. His friends in Houston, other Nigerians who'd become his surrogate family, tried to get him to talk about what happened, but he deflected their concern with jokes and subject changes. 2 months after returning from Lagos, on a cold January evening, Emeka was driving a passenger to the airport when the woman in his back seat struck up a conversation. She was probably in her 60s, with kind eyes and a warm smile. You seem troubled, young man, she said about halfway through the trip. Emeka glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Just tired, ma'am. Tired from work or tired from life? There's a difference. He found himself smiling despite everything. Maybe a bit of both. Can I give you some unsolicited advice? I'm old, so I've earned the right to be nosy. Sure, why not? Whatever you're carrying, whatever weight you're holding onto, it's going to crush you if you don't find a way to put it down. Pain is inevitable. We all get hurt. But suffering is optional. Suffering is what happens when we clutch onto that pain and refuse to let it go. And how exactly do you let it go? Emeka asked, genuinely curious. You forgive. Not for them, but for you. You forgive so you can move forward instead of being trapped in what was. And if they don't deserve forgiveness? Forgiveness isn't about what they deserve. It's about what you deserve. You deserve peace. You deserve to not carry this anger and hurt around like a backpack full of rocks. When he dropped her off at the airport, she tipped him $40 and patted his hand. You're going to be fine, sweetheart. Trust me on that. Her words stayed with him. That night, in his apartment, Emeka did something he hadn't been able to do since returning from Lagos. He cried. He cried for the relationship that had ended, for the future that would never happen, for the years invested in something that had crumbled. He cried until he had no tears left, and then something strange happened. He felt lighter. Not healed, not okay, but lighter. He realized that he'd been holding his pain so tightly, feeding it with anger and bitterness, keeping it alive when he should have been letting it die. Over the next several months, Emeka slowly began to rebuild himself. He started going to a small Nigerian church in Houston, not because he'd suddenly become religious, but because he needed community, needed to be around people who understood where he came from. He reconnected with old hobbies he'd abandoned, started playing football with a local league on weekends, began reading again. In March, 6 months after the disastrous trip to Lagos, he finally responded to one of Precious's messages. She'd been texting sporadically, usually late at night Lagos time, messages that ranged from apologies to updates about her life to random memories of their time together. He kept his response simple, I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, but because I need to move on. I hope you're happy. Take care of yourself. Her response came an hour later, thank you. You don't know how much I needed to hear that. I'm so sorry for everything. You deserved better. I hope you find someone who can give you what I couldn't. You're going to make someone very happy one day. He didn't respond to that message, but he didn't need to. That exchange gave him something he hadn't realized he was missing, closure. Real closure. Not the kind that comes from dramatic confrontations or detailed explanations, but the quiet kind that comes from acceptance and letting go. By the summer, almost a year after that terrible Friday night in Lagos, Emeka found himself genuinely happy again. Not in spite of what had happened, but because of how he'd chosen to handle it. He'd learned that he was resilient, that heartbreak wasn't fatal, that he could survive the worst-case scenario and come out the other side still intact. He'd also learned valuable lessons about relationships, about communication, about the challenges of long distance, about the importance of presence in love. One afternoon in July, while having lunch with some Nigerian friends in Houston, the topic of relationships came up. Everyone was sharing their stories, their heartbreaks and triumphs. When they turned to Emeka, he found himself telling them about Precious, about the surprise that backfired, about the pain and the healing. When he finished, one of his friends, a woman named Emeka who worked as a nurse, said something that struck him, the thing about trust is that once it's broken, it changes you. But that change doesn't have to be for the worse. You can become bitter and closed off, or you can become more discerning, more aware of red flags, more intentional about who you give your heart to. You get to choose which version of yourself emerges from the pain. Emeka realized she was right. He had changed. He was more cautious now, yes, but also more self-aware. He knew his worth better. He understood that love required more than just feeling, it required compatible life circumstances, shared values, presence, and consistent effort from both people. He wasn't afraid of loving again, but he was determined to be wiser about how and whom he loved. As the months continued to pass, Emeka built a good life in Houston. He got promoted at the warehouse to an operations manager position. He moved out of his studio into a proper one-bedroom apartment. He made genuine friends, built community, found joy in small moments like weekend football games and Sunday dinners after church. Did he still think about Precious sometimes? Of course. You don't erase 5 years of shared history just because it ended badly. But the thoughts no longer came with sharp pain. They were more like old photographs, images of a previous life that belonged to a different version of himself. He could look at those memories now without anger or longing, just a sort of wistful acknowledgement that they'd existed and now they didn't. In December, more than a year after everything happened, Emeka was invited to a Christmas party by one of his church friends. He almost didn't go, tempted to spend the evening alone with Netflix and leftover Chinese food, but something made him change his mind at the last minute. At that party, he met a woman named Jasmine, a second-generation Nigerian American who was a teacher at a local elementary school. They talked for 3 hours straight, about everything from Nigerian jollof rice superiority debates to their favorite books to their experiences navigating between two cultures. When the party ended and they exchanged numbers, Emeka felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope of someone trying to fill a void, but the gentle, optimistic hope of someone who'd healed enough to be open to new possibilities. As he drove home that night, he found himself thinking about the journey that had brought him to this moment. The betrayal that had felt like the end of the world had actually been a beginning. A painful, unwanted beginning, but a beginning nonetheless. It had forced him to grow, to learn about himself, to discover reserves of strength he hadn't known he possessed. He thought about that passenger who told him suffering was optional, about choosing to forgive not for Precious but for himself, about the slow, unglamorous work of healing that doesn't happen in montages or dramatic moments but in 1,000 tiny choices to keep moving forward. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted completely? Have you ever had a moment where everything you believed about your life turned out to be wrong? How did you handle it? Did you let it make you bitter, or did you find a way to grow from the pain? And what would you have done if you were in Emeka's shoes that Friday night in Lagos? Would you have stayed and fought for the relationship? Would you have walked away like he did? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious to hear your perspectives on this. The truth is, Emeka's story isn't unique. Somewhere right now, someone is being betrayed. Someone is discovering that the person they loved has been lying to them. Someone is having their world shattered. But here's what Emeka learned and what I hope you take away from this story: you will survive. The pain that feels permanent isn't. The heartbreak that feels fatal won't kill you. You have more strength than you know, more capacity for healing than you can imagine. And sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for becoming the best version of yourself. Emeka didn't plan for his surprise trip to end in heartbreak. He didn't choose betrayal. But he did choose how to respond to it. He chose to feel his pain instead of numbing it. He chose to forgive when he could have held on to bitterness. He chose to remain open to love even after love had hurt him. Those choices made all the difference. So if you're going through your own heartbreak right now, if you're in the middle of your own painful surprise, know this: you're not alone. The pain won't last forever. And on the other side of this, there's a version of you waiting, stronger, wiser, and more whole than you've ever been. You just have to keep moving forward, one day at a time, until you get there. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end. If you found value in Emeka's story, if it resonated with you or made you think about your own experiences, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel because we have many more powerful stories like this coming your way. Until next time, take care of yourself, be kind to your heart, and remember that even the worst surprises